and welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo. Fresh into the new year and hopeful of better times, we begin to take a look, we begin to look towards issues of empowerment of the citizenry, as well as quality and standards of goods and services in Nigeria. Also, I heard Elizabeth Omori takes on the issue of COVID-19 and responds at the subnational level. Elizabeth?
Well, on the media review segment, we will x-ray the COVID-19 status of a particular state in Nigeria. We'll take a look at the challenges and efforts at curtailing the spread of the disease.
Very well, let's get started. Let's begin the conversation on quality and standards. I do know that as a rule in life, establishing standards would keep an individual in contention and at par with expectations and competitions within some social construct. And in terms of products, whether goods or services, quality is critical to long-term customer satisfaction, trust, and loyalty. As a matter of fact, it leads to increased long-term revenue, business stability, and profitability. Director General Standards Organization of Nigeria, SON, Farouk Salim, joins me in the studio to discuss how much so we have achieved by standardizing products and services, that is, setting quality standards. Welcome to Insight, sir.
Thank you.
Please help me put this in proper context, for us. Quality varies with individuals, but excellence is universal. So, in essence, industry governing bodies like the Standards Organization of Nigeria and, of course, your sister agency, NAFDAC, are not just keen on improving quality, but ensuring excellence. Is that correct?
Well, standardization actually is part of excellence, but our job is just to put the minimum base, and then after the minimum, whatever you do above that as a manufacturer, then it's your responsibility, because we cannot insist on excellence. It's not our purview. Our purview is to set a standard which is the minimum acceptable for any products in the country.
Okay, I'll take that. So I understand Nigeria loses about 15 trillion naira to fake goods annually, and I wonder if we're still ranked among the world's highest market for fake and substandard goods. DG, it would seem that the production process for fake and substandard products are evolving and becoming more technical. Is SON evolving at the pace sufficiently enough to close the gap and stop this trend in its track?
Well, as the Standard Organization of Nigeria is one of the few organizations in the country with very, very experienced, highly professional employees. So on that aspect, we are doing very well. Now, the issue of catching up with fake products, we're doing the best we can, but we have limitations, and those limitations, like resources are not available because of circumstances, and some physical barriers that we have, and we are working on to make sure things are better.
What is the status of the move or plan to have your inspection officers from SON, and I also hear NAFDAC is part of the arrangement, back at the ports and borders to curb the influx of fake and substandard products into the country? Where are we at the moment with that plan?
Well, I think NAFDAC is already back in a couple of years ahead, back. Our own situation is a very interesting situation. By law, our SON Act 2015 demands that we should be at the port. So basically, that law has not been repealed by the National Assembly, but there are certain policies that were initiated by the previous government because of ease of doing business, and that policy, unfortunately, was sustained, even though there was no legal basis for it. So we are still lobbying our best we can to convince the authorities, people higher up than me, to allow us to get back in the port like we are supposed to by law.
When we started this program, you talked about, I raised the issue of excellence, and you actually corrected me by saying you set a standard. How do you peg the standard for goods and services? Let me take services for instance. Normally when you're setting a standard for businesses in delivering services to people, is that extingent on your requirements or what you expect customers to expect from such businesses?
Standards are made basically with the collaboration of the producers, the consumers, and then with agreeable international standards. So basically, our job is to collaborate with the industry, whatever industry it is, because we are all in all industries. Okay. So whatever industry produces an item, we sit with them and then we set the standards, okay. We agree with it, and then the council approves it.
Okay, it is often said that a business quality standard must reflect the behavioral pattern of its potential customers. That's what I just talked about now. But again, is that realistic? And given that Nigerians are prone to and have for a very long time, they would rather cut corners and go for cheaper products and services rather than pay for, what they consider high-end. How are you balancing checks to ensure that products in the market meet quality standards and yet have that competitive advantage, for instance, against imported alternatives?
Well, first of all, I'd like to draw your attention to a big faux pas on your part. Nigerians are not prone to substandard issues. Some Nigerians are.
Some
Nigerians are, but it's not our nature. We essentially, the problem we are having with substandard goods is that people, because of the economic situations, are looking for less expensive items, and then in that process, they end up, being victims of substandard goods. Well, on the other hand, people who are businessmen would like to get extra profit by buying things that are substandard to make extra profit on it. That too is a process, but the bottom line is our job as enforcers of standards, we're supposed to make sure those standards are held properly, and then if there are violations, we have means of taking care of that. So you're asking a lot of questions within, a lot of issues that we cannot address within a few seconds. But definitely.
But can you try as much as possible to just elaborate on some of them?
Well, yeah, the issue of substandard goods in this country that are prevalent, there is enforcement. We still have to enforce more. Okay. We have to get ability to stop the goods right before they get into the country. Okay. You have to understand our country is so vast and big. If something crosses Lagos to Kano or Maiduguri, it's hard for any organization to trace it efficiently. So we do have those constraints, and as we are working with the organizations from the ports to the markets, associations. Most of these companies have associations they deal with. Importers Association, electronic associations. We are doing a holistic approach. We are working with them so that they can fish out some of the bad egg within them, because, like I said, this is an issue that is not just a general issue. It's a few people spoil the deal for everybody.
I was going to throw up the issue of your collaboration with sister agencies and Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, importers and exporters and all of that. How successfully have you been able to synergize, with these groups in carrying out your mandate?
So far, in my 2.5 months here, I've done, I was very lucky so far to have 100% cooperations from these associations. In fact, a good example is before the New Year's ending, we had an issue where we raided substandard adulterating factories in Lagos and Ibadan with the help of the manufacturer, local manufacturer, with the help of the police, with the help of the associations of lubricant of Nigeria. We were able to collaborate and arrest people, seize goods into millions and millions of naira. And right now, we're in the process of prosecuting these individuals. So I would like to say, so far, our holistic approach is making progress, but there's still room, there's still room for improvement, and we are working on it.
DG, granted, SON and sister agencies have a mandate to carry out these checks and all, but it will seem that we as a country, even though you've said that it's only some Nigerians, and I totally agree with you, have an issue with, patronizing substandard and fake goods. But we seem to have a challenge with the issue of quality control checks in the country, whether it's an SME or a large production outfit. Shouldn't quality control be an integral aspect of production and output?
Well, it should be, and it is. We have inspections that we do while the factory is being built, and we have inspections we're doing while the product is produced. We have certifications for those goods. And at one point, we were working on a product authentication mark, which was kind of delayed a little bit because of misunderstanding with Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and other individuals. But we are working on that. So it's a process that, you know, it's not just one item.
Indeed, very true. I would like to ask you something. I know you just took over the Arms of Affairs barely 3 months ago, but are you in the know of an arrangement that we have with China over the importation of fake and substandard goods into Nigeria? What do you know of that arrangement? Is it still subsisting?
I'm not aware of any arrangement, but I do hope to have, if I have the power to make arrangement with a country like China and other countries around the world that sends goods to this country, one arrangement I would love to have is the ability to return substandard goods back to the person sending it down here, and then paying back the importer their money if they were wrongly deceived. If they are not deceived, then we prosecute the importer, while Chinese or American government, whatever government it is, will prosecute the manufacturer producing substandard goods from their own laws over there. But that law, to my knowledge, is not yet there. But I would definitely like to appeal to maybe the authorities in the future to put that in a negotiation with countries like China and other importers, exporters.
Well, since you're talking about plans and what you like to do, I'd like to ask you this. Well, what would you? We also have an issue with imported electronics products into the country. They're mostly, for some years, we had an issue with importation of fake and substandard electronics and electrical products into the country. What would you like to do about that? I mean, given that you're already talking about plans and what you like to do in the near future.
Well, imported electronics, people probably don't see the dangers. The dangers involved in electronics are so massive. You probably have a child trying to plug a charger, the charger exploding in their face, destroying them for life. You have an individual plugging their phone overnight, and then it catches fire, and the house is burned down. I mean, there's so many difficulties there. But like I said, with electronics, with any other good coming to this country, it's the same issue. We need to be availed those products when they are getting into the country. We need to have the ability to inspect them, check them, and we do have labs. SON has one of the largest, most sophisticated labs in the country, where almost every good can be tested and verified for quality. So the issue really is access. We have enough employees that are out there on the street doing work, which at this particular moment, I'm not very happy with sending people's kids who are just graduate of engineering to doing enforcement work on the streets, stopping containers and checking them. This should have been done at the port of entry, where we can collaborate with Customs, NAFDAC, and other agencies and do the proper thing.
DJ, I'd like to ask you something else. I mean, when it comes to the cost of production versus quality,
yes, should
increase in production cost, for instance, affect the quality of a product or service?
Well, production cost, essentially, there's much more to production cost than just quality. Don't forget, we are in a country where energy is not sufficient.
Exactly, and that is exactly what I mean when you have increases, for instance, in the cost of production.
So average manufacturers in this country, honestly, are doing a wonderful job surviving so far with all the inabilities. I mean, it's like a boxer having both hands tied in the back, and you expect them to get a knockout. So our industries in the country are doing a wonderful job of surviving, and cost shouldn't be an issue with quality. Quality is just essential. It doesn't make sense to produce any item that is below quality, because it's going to harm individuals. And our job as an organization is to make sure there is public safety in addition to quality goods for us, especially with this African trade, free trade, quality products produced in Nigeria, if they are not up to standard, will not go to Nigeria and be sold. So, we're tying down our manufacturers' ability to be competitive in the market.
Well, you're the expert here, but my personal take on this issue, and I have a reason for asking you. I would rather prefer a situation where manufacturers increase the cost of products if there's an increase in production, rather than reducing the quality of that product because they want to cut corners. But then let me take you outside of Nigeria for a bit and talk about regional trade. The African Continental Trade Free Trade Agreement is in the works, and Nigeria is actively part of that. Since we are a signatory already to it. As a signatory, are we likely to align to standards and procedures determined by the Secretariat of AFTAC, or are we likely to fix ours and expect importers, to conform to our standards?
Well, before we say that, let me do a little bit of rebuttal. I didn't say that the manufacturers should lower their standards.
No. I just gave my personal view.
I agree.
I said you are the expert, and I said my personal view.
They are
Yes.
true.
Yes.
They shouldn't. I don't ask them to sacrifice.
No. I did not say you said that. I said my personal view on the matter.
To answer your question, standards. Nigerian standards, when it's in Nigeria, are the basis for our judgment. And those Nigerian standards are created with a collaboration with international standards, African standards, all together. So technically, the issue of standards shouldn't be a big problem with the free trade, because the African standards are Nigerian standards too. The issue essentially is having those individuals sticking to standards protected by us as an organization, because there's no point for you to go through all the gamut of inspection, registration, certification, and then there's this individual not doing that and putting their goods out there. So that's the issue, but the standards will not be an issue for our manufacturers.
Let me still ask you something on the African continental trade. What are your thoughts on these and how it's likely to open up, markets for Africa, for us as a country, Nigeria, and then for the continent as well?
My personal thoughts, my nature, I'm an incurable optimist. First, about my country, Nigeria, and Africa in general. I honestly believe, and I stand to be corrected, that as 200 million people Nigerians are, there is no way we will not be able to compete favorably in Africa. By the way, I lived in the United States for 31 years. There are very few places in the U.S. where there are not Nigerians there competing favorably or even heading organizations. So I have confidence in Nigerians that they will not be disadvantaged by this freedom. In fact, actually, I'm more concerned about other African countries realizing our ability and maybe trying to stop us from succeeding. It's a good thing for us.
DG, before I let you go, and even though I know you've talked about these earlier, you talked about monitoring and prosecution of those who fall short of the provisions of the Enabling Act. I know that under the provisions of Sections 14 and 15 of the Enabling Act, which established the SON, individuals and corporate bodies are criminally liable if they fail to comply with or undertake certain actions as required under the Act. You're barely 3 months in office. Which would you say is your most celebrated case of clampdown on substandard products since you took over the affairs of SON?
Well, I wouldn't say celebrated, but my first biggest achievement, we have this industry in Kano, actually among the few we have actually in northern Nigeria. This gentleman's factory employs about 3,000 people who are dependent on that industry. He produces one of the highest quality lubricants in the country. I don't want to be a product endorser here, but my job is to endorse all the other products that are certified. Since you asked me about this person, believe it or not, people are faking his products even in Dubai. They will go all the way to Dubai, fake his products, ship them back to Nigeria, and try to sell it. So he has a good intelligence network with his people, and then with his help, with his association, Lubricant Association of Nigeria's help, and then with the market in Aspanda market in Lagos Association's help, we were able to raid shops and little factories producing these products, and we seized millions of naira products, which we are prosecuting people right now. We already arrested some people, and to the credit of the police, they refused to give them bail, which we really thank them for until they were charged in court. So I'm very proud of us as Nigerians collaborating, and I'm very proud of the police force for actually helping us arrest and keeping those people until they are prosecuted. So it's a wonderful achievement.
Director General Standards Organization of Nigeria, SON Farouk Salim, I want to thank you so much for your insights on this issue. It has been a pleasure engaging you for nearly half an hour. Thank you for coming on the program, sir.
Half an hour, I'm surprised. The pleasure is all mine. Looking forward to this kind of engagement in the future. Thank you.
Moving ahead now, we examine new elements of the federal government youth empowerment initiative. To satisfy your curiosity, our own Victor Azu sought to get some answers for us.
I am now joined by Yowa Apera, National Coordinator, National Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office, NASCO. A pleasure to have you join us on Insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, what might we know about the COVID-19 Rapid Response Register, and how does it differ from other social intervention programs of the federal government?
The federal government, at the advent of the pandemic, the federal government rolled out a number of measures to cushion the effect or the impact of the pandemic on Nigerians. And the federal government also identified that one of the most affected from the closure of the economy will be what you could classify the urban poor. That's the informal work sector. Those who stay in the urban areas and do mostly daily income earning jobs, like those who sell akara by the street, those market women that go daily to the markets, tailors, taxi drivers, bricklayers, etc., who live in our urban areas, who are the engines that fuel the wheels of our urban living. And so the government thought through the means of reaching these people with support. Now, in terms of crisis, global best practice is that you plan for immediate relief on the crisis, which is between 6 months to 1 year palliatives that will come in form of cash transfers or food transfer. The second category would then be what you could call the transition period, wherein you're putting people on programs that will help bring back their own means of livelihood, like small-scale grants and loans that the government is also doing through CBN. And then the third category is what you call the recovery period, which is between 1 year and 3 months. My office is saddled with the responsibility of planning for that immediate relief, which is the cash transfer. And by the directives of Mr. President, we were to then design a means for which we would target this urban poor. And that is what, under the directives of the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadia Umar Farouk, who is my principal, we designed the Rapid Response Register targeting the urban poor.
Now, so when you talk about, the different ways of reaching these urban poor, what mode of benefits do these particular ones get for the RRR? Is it cash, goods, services, or what? What exactly?
They are going to get cash. So this is what the government is doing. The government is targeting from the Economic Sustainability Plan budget 1 million poor and vulnerable Nigerians in our urban centers that we call urban poor. In addition, the Honorable Minister approached the World Bank and through the Ministry of Finance, and in discussion with them, said the existing cash transfer program of the federal government should be extended, targeting the urban poor. And so they were able to secure the agreement of the World Bank to repurpose monies from there to also target 2 million people. So in total,
let's get it right. Is 1 million the entirety of what you are targeting for this RRR, or is it just a phase of it? Because you've mentioned 1 million, you've mentioned 2 million.
Yes, so a total government is targeting 3 million through the RRR process.
Okay.
And so the 3 million, I'm now splitting where the source of funds are coming from, so that it is clear from the point of view of our listeners. 1 million is targeted through the Economic Sustainability Plan, and you see it in the budget for the Economic Sustainability Plan that was rolled out by Mr. President a couple of months ago. And then you will see the other 2 million is through the World Bank credit that the government of Nigeria is using for the current cash transfer program.
All right, that's great. But then you will agree that barely scratches the surface, considering the population size that we are dealing with, whether 1 million or even 3 million. I don't know how you're going to get across to more people, but in any case, how are the beneficiaries identified? Because to make the desired impact, it mustn't only be transparent, it has to be seen to be so. And I don't know of any supermarket where poor, vulnerable people are found.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very interesting question. Government took care, knowing the stand of Mr. President and the trust of the current administration on transparency and accountability, and perhaps why it took the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, where we sit, and the directives of the minister, that we should take due diligence in coming up with a soundproof plan that is scientific proven and can be verified by any individual or group in the country. And so what we did was we sought the partnership of the World Bank, and through the experts in the World Bank Poverty Team and NAPS team, we first used what you call technological enhanced or targeting process. Okay. Now, you give me 5 minutes to explain this. What we did was, at the start of the pandemic, you recall, in April, the National Bureau of Statistics released the National Living Standard Survey figures that stated the poverty head count for each state of the Federation. That put the poverty estimated poor people in Nigeria at 40.1%, translating to 82 million individuals in Nigeria below the poverty level. Now, we took this poverty head count for each state on one hand. We went back to the National Population Commission via a letter to request for the population estimate figure for 2020. That came to about 203 million estimated poor Nigerians across each of the states. We matched the NLSS poverty head count against the total population figure of the states. And then we come up with the estimated poor people in each of the states. Okay. Now we use technology, satellite sensing technology that further overlay these poverty figures across the state of the Federation. But you know that we are divided up to the single divisible units of a community. And so what we then did was then to go back to Bureau of Statistics and Population Commission to get the geospatial maps of every political ward in Nigeria. And you know that we have a total estimate of 8,799 political wards across the country, across the 774 LGAs.
That's correct.
And then when we did the poverty incident, we needed to first separate which are the urban political wards by the by the definition and the context of Nigeria, and which one were rural. And now, if you do that, it comes to about a total estimate of 2,600 urban political wards across the 36 states and the FCT. Now, what we then did was to say, okay, with these urban political wards and the estimated population for each of these urban political wards, if we want to estimate 5 million people, where will be the total population, urban political wards that will come to the first 5 million based on statistical evidence and scientific profiling? And then we did that up to the 14th category that will speak to close to 60 point something million Nigerians. Now, when the government has resources to pay 3 million people across the state, we came back to these scenarios. So if you want 1 million across the 36 states and the FCT, how many people will go for each political ward across the states? If we have money for 3 million, how many people will go for each political ward? If we have money for 5 million, up to the 20th million. And so now that we have money for 3 million, which are the affected political wards that will come into this 3 million? And by scientific means that I've just described before, about 1,146 political wards are targeted for these 3 million people across the 36 states of the Federation and FCT. It is also important to emphasize here that we have equitably distributed this according to the poverty head count of each state of the Federation. So it is verifiable scientifically, but also on the ground. Now, once this is now done, what then the federal government is going to do is, in collaboration with the telecommunication industries, we are going to send specific text messages to these political wards that has been isolated as targets for these people.
When you say political wards, that's not talking about a head count, for instance, in terms of individuals. So how do you, from the political wards, reach out to the specific individuals that are to be the beneficiaries?
Okay, brilliant. So when you have these urban political wards, so for instance, in Abuja here, you have the Gui political ward, which is around Jabi area, right, under Amak LG. Or you have Karishi, which is outskirt a little bit down the road after Jikwe and Co, but it's under Amak. So these two political wards came up under the poverty incidents as the most impacted or populated urban political wards where the poor and vulnerable will reside. So when you isolate that, you know that every telephone mast is located strictly around a catchment area. About 2.5 kilometer radius. And you know that all our phone numbers are tagged to our home phone masts or others. And so when you target SMSs or USSD code to this telephone mast fixed in Gui political ward, only those within whose phone numbers are attached to that particular registration area will get the SMSs. And so this individual will get this SMS after due sensitization, of course, and walking through the communities, and they will then respond.
But then, what other programs are covered under the stable of the National Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office? And how do you gauge the impact that you are making in government's poverty alleviation efforts?
Under the purview of the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, we have the National Cash Transfer Office that is saddled with the responsibility of paying Nigerians in a regular cash transfer program. That program also is paying a total of 2 million poor and vulnerable Nigerians taken out of the social registry that the NASCO has developed. Now, this 5,000 naira is consistent every 2 months. month, we pay a total of 10,000 naira to poor and vulnerable Nigerians. But the social register targeted the rural poor. So it started with rural communities. So that one is going regularly to the rural poor consistently over the period starting from 2017 that the program started up till now. The second program, of course, is the Youth Employment and Support Operations, which was a direct loan from the World Bank to states, and that was in 15 states. That particular program impacted on 24,000 youths across the 15 states who were trained on different vocations. Now, government has voted through that program over $11 million to buy starter packs to these 24,000 individuals that will help them start their businesses. And we're in the final processes of handing over those starter packs to these individuals. Now, the third program that is also under the purview of the coordination of NASCO is the Community and Social Development Program, wherein communities sit and determine community infrastructural projects, could be road, electricity, and coal, and then they apply for funding to do it. As of now, a total of 5,346 micro projects across 36 states of the Federation have been implemented by CSDP, giving access to these communities who hitherto will not have access in terms of roads, or access in terms of electricity, or access in terms of healthcare facilities like clinics, or access to education in terms of classrooms, because all these micro projects are dependent on the need of a particular community. Committing this whole process of building the social register, paying 5,000 naira cash transfer, the Youth Employment and Social Support Operations, the Community and Social Development Program, a total of over $1 billion have been committed by the federal government through the support of the World Bank across these 4 years.
Now, is your office, I'm just wondering, is your office considering infrastructure, putting the money into infrastructure that may help certain persons better provide services or even goods, and generate more money, and still the multiplier effects will apply? They will be able to pay taxes, they will be able to do other things which will multiply income for some other persons. Have you considered infrastructure in all of this?
Of course. So the Community and Social Development Program that I described earlier, that its main focus is to support communities on what we call micro projects. And it could be roads, it could be classrooms, it could be clinics, etc. It also targets vulnerable groups. It could be a group of persons living with disability within a community, or a group of widows association, where they give them stipend for small businesses. Some of these groups have gone ahead to build rice milling factories, cotton industries, garri processing, etc. And this helps them to generate revenue, but also to give their members source of livelihood. But the cash transfer program, the 5,000 naira we've been given poor and vulnerable households across the country, has yielded a lot of results in terms of impact, but in terms of stimulating infrastructural growth of businesses. You hear stories like in Jigawa State, where the women in a remote village, it was carried over the news, contributed money from this monthly 5,000 naira to buy a vehicle that is an ambulance to help women who are pregnant, take them to a nearby hospital. They contributed the money and bought a vehicle worth 400,000 naira. You will say unbelievable. You say this 5,000, what can it do? But 5,000 naira to this village women bought a 400,000 naira worth car and provided job for, of course, for their driver, but also helps women and reduce the incidence of death as a result of childbirth. Now, in other places, this same 5,000 help women in putting together in savings accounts. So when you pay them this money, 10,000 naira every 2 months, they put it in small adashi, like you call it, and cumulatively you have in excess of about 800 million naira in cumulative savings. This is huge amount of money that sits there with the community, and they are borrowing from it and starting small businesses. We have people who have poultry, fish farming, etc. across the country, and so this not as a direct intention of our program, but by giving this 5,000, Nigerians being as industrious as we are and creative as we are with resources, are committing these resources to starting up businesses that are, at the end of the 3-year period that is supposed to be under the cash transfer program, most of these individuals are already standing on their feet and you could say arguably out of poverty.
All right, now we are hitting the home stretch. So as a way of rounding off your thoughts on this conversation, clearly COVID-19 will be there when we exchange the New Year pleasantries. What strategy has your office put in place going forward?
Effectively, the framework of the Rapid Response Register provide for Nigeria the building blocks for a shock-responsive social protection, wherein at any crisis now, we will be able to activate these structures very quickly and get help more quickly to the people than we are now. It took us a long time in planning because we needed to be exact scientifically using global best practices. And so we are now ready to go into the field and get the numbers that we need. And by the advent of the new year, we will not only have information to pay 3 million people, but we have information to pay up to 20 million people depending on funds availability. And so the private sector, the donor agencies that have resources have a very transparent and equitable way of channeling these funds to the poor people that are being identified through this process. And the good news is government is saying, I'm not paying these people cash, I will pay them through their bank account. And so government is also activating the machinery of financial inclusion, wherein everyone that's coming on the Rapid Response Register must have a bank account. And so the multiplier effects will trickle down. So when government said they are very positive with all the investment put in place and strategy put in place, they'll be able to bring us out of recession in the first quarter of the year. Government meant business.
Yowa Pera, National Coordinator, National Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office, NASCO. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on Insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, up next is the media review segment with Elizabeth Omori.
The rapidly evolving situation of COVID-19 seems to have made the entire world pause for a moment. Things have been changing extremely rapidly, and everywhere you look, there's information on the virus and how to protect yourself from it. Knowing the facts, medical experts say will properly prepare and protect you and your loved ones. As the world is grappling with the containment of COVID-19, today we will review a state in Nigeria, and Cross River State will be our case study. And I have with me the Commissioner for Health, Cross River State, Betta Edu. It's nice to have you on Insights.
Thank you for having me.
Your state is one of the states Nigerians hoped would not record a case, but unfortunately it did. Could you tell us about the status of your state?
Okay, thank you very much. I think COVID-19, like we all know, is a pandemic that is up upon all of us. We were able to hold the fort because we started a lot of preventive measures on time in our state. We started the No Mask, No Movement even before the Nigerian PTF decided that masks would be a solution to protect people in public places. We brought about several other innovative approach to the management of the pandemic in our dear state, including shutting out the state, ensuring that our borders, both international and land borders, were manned by not just the security agencies, but government officials, top government officials, including the governor of the state, Senator Professor Ben Ayade. So it was a lot of work put in, but at the point where the federal government decided that the lockdown was over, interstate shutdown was over, and then people can move the way they wanted to move, of course, considering other economic reasons, we had to open up, and after which we recorded the first case of COVID-19 in the state. And since then, we've had some cases of COVID-19 in the state. Unfortunately, very recently, the NCDC uploaded, I think, 75 cases on admission in Cross River State, which definitely is not so, because there was no place really where we had 75 people on admission in Cross River State. But for me, the numbers are not what's important. What is important is the ability for us to respond, build a system that is resilient and can respond to not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but can be able to respond to any other epidemic or disease that might arise for us as a country. So what we have presently right now in Cross River State is a system or a response that have been affected by the NSAS protest, which was hijacked by, of course, the NSAS protesters and hoodlums and all of that. They destroyed our 100 beds isolation center. They equally destroyed the reference lab where we test for COVID-19 in the state, not just COVID-19, other things like TB, HIV. In fact, they carted away with samples of COVID-19, positive samples of COVID-19 from the dirty refrigerator. They carted away with it, and of course, it calls for a lot of concern. Unfortunately, we've reached out to the PTF and, of course, NCDC, but we are yet to have a response in our state to fix these things back, to get the response back on track. And this is not just for Cross River State. Several other states are also without molecular labs that can test for COVID-19. Some have to depend on private labs for testing, which is not right.
Right, that's quite sad, cutting away with COVID-19 samples, you know. Okay, but that's by the way. You mentioned a couple of measures, not pharmaceutical measures, in place to prevent people from contracting the disease. But what is the level of compliance to these non-pharmaceutical protocols?
So, like you know, a lot right now, since the vaccine is not here with us, a lot right now depends on compliance with protocols that have been put in place by state governments based on their local context, and of course by the federal government through the PTF. A lot is dependent on that. People are expected to use their face masks always in public places. Wash your hands regularly, use the hand sanitizer, avoid public gathering. Of course, this was well adhered to at the initial stage until we started having what we would refer to as the COVID fatigue. People just felt, look, I'm tired of wearing face masks. I'm tired of washing my hands always. I'm tired of moving around with hand sanitizers. And they began to let things go just about anyhow. And you find people who were not gathering before attend very large parties, take things for granted. And this has led to the increased spread of the disease, including the second wave, which is now upon Nigeria.
Okay, talking about second wave and vaccination, the PTF and the federal government have done enough in sensitizing Nigerians, putting measures in place so that we reduce the spread of COVID-19. But vaccination is key.
Vaccine which has been approved presently by WHO is the Pfizer BioNTech. That vaccine needs to be stored between -80 degrees centigrade to -60 degrees centigrade.
Yes.
For me, I would strongly appeal to the federal government, the PTF, and of course the Federal Minister for Health, that rather than going through the route of saying, let's invest 500 billion on vaccines, we can take half of that money and invest it on the system. We can build the health system. We can get the cold chain working across all the states in Nigeria. We can invest in the primary health centers, the secondary facilities. So we can invest in all of this, build molecular labs. At this point where we're dealing with a pandemic, every single state should have a functional molecular lab, and then of course other sentinel sites where this COVID can be tested. And then finally, we should be able to build permanent isolation center in the 36 states and federal capital in Nigeria. These are things we must invest as a matter of urgency before we bring in the vaccine. We must plan properly as we go ahead to get the vaccines in.
All right, before I take you on the issue of impact on the economy of the state, let's talk about behavioral change. Don't you think we need reorientation? Because some still do not believe that the disease exists.
I think it's very important to state this very clearly. COVID-19 is real. right? It's a disease, it's real. It might have a low mortality, great. We might be able to pull through without having too many people die, great and beautiful for our country. However, you don't want to be that one person who will slip through the cracks. You don't want to lose your family member, your loved ones, your friends to COVID-19. And so people need to come to this understanding that it is real and you should protect yourself. So we cannot afford to take anything for granted. Please, COVID-19 is real and you need to protect yourself always.
Always. All right, Cross River State is one of the tourist destinations. How has the emergence of the global health challenge affected tourism? Because virtually all the states are at a lot.
This was one of the very silent, quiet Christmas and New Year festive period for Cross River State for the first time in over 15 years. We didn't have millions of people dancing on our streets. We have the Calabar Carnival, which became, under His Excellency Senator Professor Ben Ayadi, the second largest carnival in the world. We had people coming from 42 countries, international displays, people coming from the 35 states and the FCT to display in Calabar. Thousands, hundreds, millions of people are on the streets dancing, partying for at least 7 days, which we used to call the Insomnia Week or the Power Week. We used to have displays, musicians come, comedians come and display in a stadium filled to the capacity with people. But this year, we had a quiet Cross River. There was nobody on the streets. We just had everywhere down and quiet. And we did this because we wanted to protect lives and, of course, keep our citizens safe. We didn't want to bring in people who can introduce the disease and increase the spread and put lives at risk. So the governor called off the Calabar Carnival this year. He called off all the celebrations. He called off all the activities which we usually do during the Calabar Carnival. And we were really left with really a quiet place.
Okay. All right. Going forward, how can we prevent ourselves from pandemics?
Every state needs a molecular lab at this point. Every state needs a permanent isolation center at this point if we must respond adequately to the coronavirus pandemic and any other pandemic that might arise in future.
Betaido, Commissioner for Health, Cross River State, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And that's it on the review segment.
And this is where we'll draw the curtain on this episode of the program. To join us same time next week for more on Insights. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Don't forget, COVID-19 is real. Please stay safe. We'll see you next week.